Eyewitness News presents Newsmakers with your hosts, Jayne and Bugda and Andy Mehalshick.
Hello and welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Andy Mehalshick.
And I'm Jayne and Bugda. Many area grandparents are entering a new chapter in their lives, one they may not have expected, raising their grandchildren.
And becoming parents for the second time around can present many challenges and concerns. We are joined by grandparent advocates who are here to offer support, resources, and answers to questions. Coming up, meet our guests.
And our conversation will begin when this edition of Newsmakers returns right after this. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Jayne and Bugda along with Andy Mehalshick, and we have a very interesting topic today. It's said that parents can be everywhere, so God created grandparents. And today we are talking about grandparents who have a new job, a new chapter in life. They're raising their grandchildren, and many have a lot of questions. And we have a panel of guests here who have a lot of answers.
And we hear a lot about how the families have changed over the years, the family dynamic. And with various factors, which we'll talk about, many grandparents across the country here in northeastern Pennsylvania have become parents a second time around. It's a blessing, it's a great thing, but there are challenges there, but you have support out there, and that's what we're talking about today.
So we're joined today by Grandparents Raising Grandchildren Advocacy Council members. These are advocates, and I'm joined by Arline Matkins. She is a grandparent.
Yes.
Frank Mariano, grandparent and advocate, and Howard Grossman, grandparent and advocate. And they've been doing this for some time, answering grandparents' questions. So let's talk a little bit about, the history of the Grandparents Advocacy Council. Tell us a little bit about how this all started.
Okay, well, I really want to defer to Howard for a moment just to say that Howard probably brought awareness of grandparents raising grandchildren to Luzerne County. And that was a number of years ago when he started his conference that is held on an annual basis. I came out of the Advocacy Fund for Grandparents Raising Grandchildren, which started when 3 grandparents who were in one of our support groups felt their right. They needed more rights. They didn't have enough rights to manage their grandchildren properly. They went to a local lawmaker, Eddie De Pashinsky, and he invited them to Harrisburg, where they presented in front of 2 or 3 of the House committees at that time. From that came Act 22 of 2018. What that act did was it gave temporary emergency custody to grandparents. As Arline knows and many grandparents know, sometimes it's simply a knock on the door in the middle of the night saying the parents can no longer care for their children. Will you take them in, or we will put them into the foster system? Grandparents almost inevitably will say we'll take them in. But prior to this act, they had no rights. They weren't able to register the kids in school. They weren't able to make health decisions, etc. This gives them the temporary custody they need to do the things that they need to do. From that group of parents and Representative Pashinsky came the group Advocacy Fund for Grandparents Raising Grandchildren.
And it's really amazing. I think a lot of folks, and I know I was educated by working with your group and over the years covering stories involving kids who were left alone for many times a tragic reason. Grandparents, you would think because they're blood and they're the parents of the parents, that they would naturally have legal right. And they did not. And in many cases now they still don't. And that's still a hurdle we have to cross, right?
Right. Yeah, there are a lot of gaps in the law and in the rights for grandparents. For example, if a child were placed with someone other than a grandparent, that grandparent can't automatically just go say hello or visit or spend time. They would need permission. If that permission weren't granted, they would have to get a court order.
And that blows your mind, because
it
speaking
does.
as a grandparent,
It
it's
does.
like that little child, and maybe sometimes not so little, knows you and has a connection with you in so many ways, and you don't have any legal right to step in and say, can I contact?
Right.
Well, we have a state legislator. His name has been mentioned already, Eddie De Pashinsky. He's very, very supportive of the programs that exist for grandparents. And in fact, he introduced 2 pieces of legislation several years ago which passed by the General Assembly, signed by the then governor, and he's trying to work on another set of legislative needs that hopefully can pass at some point in the future. And then prior to him, Senator Ray Musto was extraordinarily active and very supportive of this. And in fact, the senator put enough money aside so that we could afford hiring a coordinator for 3 years. And that was very helpful at that point in time. And now we hope that the conference that we're going to mention to be held on October 24th of this year at the Woodlands from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. will be very successful. We want to get more people following the difficult time that we all went through, 2020, 2021, and the pandemic. So we hope that we'll get more people than we've had since the pandemic at this conference. And we will have not only a lot of speakers, but we will have resource tables, probably at least 30 this year, and I hope for more. And I hope we get more people than we've had in the last couple of years, because I think the pandemic slowed down a lot of nonprofits who were trying to put events together, and it was very, very difficult because of the pandemic.
And you know, you've been in this for a while, so how have you seen your numbers grown over the last couple years? Have you seen an increase in people coming to you?
I think when you look at the numbers, you know, you can say that the problem has, well, I think actually statistically the problem has kind of leveled off, but still it's a significant number of kids in Luzerne County, for example, who are being raised by their grandparents and throughout the state. The thing that's really important, I think, is that when you listen to how the programs started, it was grandparents in their particular situation that were proactive. And I think that's what happened. Too many times the grandparents are not, they don't know who to turn to for help when there is help available. But you know, the ones that do seek help, so we have support groups, which are very, very important. The numbers in our support groups kind of ebb and flow as people's situations change. But I think it's safe to say since the pandemic, the number of people coming to our support groups has diminished a bit. And I think that's kind of characteristic of this post-pandemic kind of era.
We have the numbers up there, so if someone's looking at home, they can reach out to you, or they can call the number for a support group and find out some answers to their questions. Let me ask you something, Arline. What are some of the biggest challenges that a grandparent can face?
For myself, I had a friend who, you know, advised me to contact, you know, Howard, so I got in with him. My daughter had married someone from another state, from Wisconsin, and then he left. So I had my daughter and my granddaughter both at our house. And then we had to get legal advice, like to, you know, go ahead and, you know, have her registered here, and custody, and, you know, child support and everything. And we were filling in meanwhile. So it was a big help. It was a big help. And then we'd go and talk to Howard. My granddaughter even went and talked to him. So she was happy to go see him.
And I won't bore you with a lot of statistics, but there are three that I want to mention, okay? For northeastern Pennsylvania, or as I call the Pocono Northeast, there's over 21,000 families that have this situation. In the state of Pennsylvania, there's over 90,000. And nationally, there's pretty close to 2 million. So these numbers are very significant as far as why we put together 22 years ago a group or a coalition of interested agencies who met periodically, and now we've merged that with the organization that Frank has mentioned, and that created a new organization called Grandparents Raising Grandchildren Advocacy Council. So that, I think, is a step in the right direction.
I guess the big challenge also, or one of the challenges, is getting the word out that the help is out there. Because I would think a lot of times grandparents are thrust into being parents, I hate to say it, literally overnight. or it's sudden, and they're not thinking about support. They're worried about their grandchild, obviously, and then they realize they need help. So even though you were a parent, being a grandparent now, because many of us are getting a little bit more mature, a little bit older, it's more of a challenge physically and financially too.
Right. It's also the challenge of how times have changed.
Right.
Raising a child 30 years ago is significantly different than raising a child today. Arline could tell us more about that, but I'm sure.
We had to go to court and get permission to attend like the hearings and to be able to take my granddaughter for her immunizations and doctor visits and so forth. So it was pretty involved, and I was working at the time, so I had to fit that in somewhere. But I was always there for my granddaughter and now my grandson. So.
And Arline, what age were your grandchildren when you became basically a parent again, and how old are they now?
Well, she told me don't say her name. So my granddaughter was about like a year old when her dad left, and I don't know, I think it was like when she was 2 or 3 that we got to go with Howard and find out like what legal place we could go to and so forth. So it was very beneficial. And then my husband and I would both go and talk to Howard about anything that turned up and how she was doing in school and finances, anything. So it was very helpful.
It was nice to
But I'm a lot different than a lot of the other cases with the grandparents, But we were fortunate.
And she's 14 now? Your
She's
granddaughter's
she's going to be 16 in November.
driving. We were talking before
Yes,
air.
and she wants
That's
to
always
learn
a
to
challenge.
drive,
She's
yes.
16, oh boy.
Right.
So did you get her a little electric motor car to drive? It's not a real car?
No, I have
You wish you had those days back,
I
right?
have a car, a Sonata that, she had the one though in daycare, like the little plastic one.
Why can't they just stay
Yeah,
that age?
that.
No, as parents, why can't they stay that age? And we're having some fun with this, but all of a sudden
Right,
now
but
you're in the golden years.
Yeah.
And of course we'll do what we have to do as a grandparent, but Arline, how many families out there, again, it's thrust upon them. And of course they'll do the right thing, but doing the right thing isn't necessarily the legal thing, because the rights are a challenge, right?
Right, and it was difficult with the generation because my daughter and my granddaughter, we might have different viewpoints. And I didn't want to rock the boat, but I had to pitch in and help out.
And Frank, you mentioned the differences in from when you were a parent, now as a grandparent. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I think almost from any, and we hear it, in our support groups, but almost every aspect of child rearing is all of a sudden thrust upon the grandparent, whether it's helping with homework, which is a little different now than it was, because you're accessing the computer, you're looking at attendance online, you're looking at their assignments perhaps online, that type of thing, to just how much screen time does a kid have, when do I shut the phone off, when do I let the phone on, are they in their bed at night under the covers still on their phone, and all the I guess the dangers that are come with that in terms of what is it that they're watching, is it harmful or is it healthy type of thing. So I think the other aspects of all the issues with school, all the issues with just discipline. You go from a grandparent where you want to be able to be, with my grandchildren, I would like to spoil them and give them everything I can, whether or not their parents like it. And then all of a sudden, I have to be the disciplinarian. I have to make sure that they're up on time for school and brushing their teeth and all the other things that need to be done.
And school becomes not only important to the grandchild or the grandchildren, but to the grandparent too, because what we all went through school is quite different today than what we all went through 40, 50 years ago.
And what is the most common question, when you meet somebody at one of your events or someone calls? Is there one question that stands out that someone always asks?
Well, much of what we have done is we offer financial assistance to grandparents who are trying to adopt or for their initial custody. So we will work directly with their attorney to give them up to $2,800 to help pay those legal expenses. So we often will get a lot of legal questions. And I must say that that's where the support groups are particularly helpful. You know, I can talk about what I hear from other people, but when you have other people in the room who have lived it, who know the pitfalls and are willing to guide you, when you have a good support group and people who are sharing and also trying to support, there's a kind of magic that happens with that.
Grandparents often ask, who can they talk to? Now, they can talk to other grandparents going through this situation, and that's why we have a conference every year.
Right.
And this year will be the 19th annual conference. And we always have, as I said earlier, resource tables so that there's always time given during that day for the grandparent to go visit as many of the resource tables as they can. And a lot of these tables offer assistance to the grandparent community. So, and Frank mentioned support groups. Support groups are awfully important, and we want to see more support groups created. There are 2 or 3 that exist in Luzerne and Lackawanna counties, and we had more in other counties, but some of them had to stop because of the pandemic. So we're trying to get those back in again. And that now happened in Hazleton and Wyoming County. They had support groups that were active. Pandemic caused them to stop. Now they're back doing it again, which is gret.
That is good, yeah.
As long as we're talking about support groups, if I may, we're hoping within the next 1 to 2 months that we'll be able to start a support group in Hazleton that will be bilingual.
I was going to ask about that, yes.
The thing that's important about the support groups and that particular group is every time that we have a support group meeting scheduled for the one up here in the Wyoming Valley, we send out a link for Zoom. So grandparents who are very busy, maybe they have a child who's sick, maybe they can't get out of the house that particular night, they could join us. So if we start doing a bilingual support group, that also could be zoomed out, so no matter where anyone lives in the county, they could still take advantage of that bilingual support.
I'd like to mention one other thing. There's a state entity that now exists that wasn't around 5 years ago. So it's about 5 years of history now, and that's Kin Connector. And Kin Connector has a staff in Harrisburg that works on a lot of things statewide, and we work closely with one of their staff. In fact, he'll be coming in again to the conference on the 24th of October, and we'll have a lot of new speakers and some of the speakers who have been here before.
Well, we're going to take a quick break, and for the Kin Connectors, we will have that information on our website. We're under 2822news.com. We're under the Newsmakers link, so information on today's show with valuable links to your website, to state websites will be on there. And you are watching Newsmakers. We're a proud recipient of several Pennsylvania Association of Broadcasting Awards for Excellence in Public Affairs Programming and Keystone State Media Awards for Best Talk Show in the state. And we'll be back right after this.
Welcome back to Newsmakers. Andy Mehalshick, with my good friend and colleague Jayne Bugda. We're talking about grandparents raising grandchildren, Advocacy Council of NEPA. Howard Grossman, Grandparents Raising Grandchildren Advocate. Frank Mariano, Grandparents Raising Grandchildren Advocate. And Arline Matkins, also an advocate. And we're talking about, and when I say an issue, it doesn't necessarily mean a problem, but they're challenges. We're seeing more grandparents, and Howard and I, we started this 20-some years ago, covering this. And we always felt that grandparents, of course, are there for your grandchildren. But now, some are thrust into it unexpectedly or with challenges for various reasons, but there is support out there. Grandparents didn't know where to go before.
When we started 22 years ago, give or take, there was not great awareness of this demographic. And now there's at least, I think, a lot of awareness of how significant this demographic is as I said before, nationally, statewide, and regionally. And that's very, very important. And now we have to work on getting more funding available as much as possible, and getting the connection between the resources that are out there and what a grandparent needs. I still get calls, either phone calls or emails, from new grandparents not knowing that there is a program that exists that can help them. So that's very, very important to get that information out.
I was going to say, in terms of the importance of this, not just to the grandparent themselves or the grandchild, but the entire community. Every child that's placed with a grandparent, if that child were placed in foster care, it would cost between $8,000 and $15,000 a year. In Luzerne County, for example, that's a $2 to $4 million savings annually. And you multiply that by the entire state. So we have tried to advocate with various lawmakers, et cetera, to try to have some of that revenue that's really being saved come down to the grandparents as they need it. And it's important to note that we are the only program of this kind in the state. No one else is giving grants to help grandparents with their legal expenses or providing the support groups that we do.
And you would think it's a no-brainer, because for the most part, there are exceptions. At least the grandparents are family and blood, and there's a heart connection and love with the child.
Right.
And it's almost like people who take caregivers of the elderly, those who are at home. The state has programs where you can get paid to take care of your loved one.
Right.
Why not have the same kind of program? I think you guys, we're going in that direction for sure. Why not provide more financial help for grandparents raising grandchildren?
Well, now with the merger that was mentioned earlier, I think that is going to happen at some point in time. I won't predict when, but I think we'll get more ways to reach out to the grandparent community. And by the way, it's not just grandparents. It could be uncles, could be aunts, whatever, and they're welcome to attend this conference. And the grandparent community is free at the conference. They don't have to pay a dime, and they'll get a lot of information and a hot lunch.
And that's important to know, because I know, Arline, you were mentioning another challenges that we don't think about, but kids have busy lives.
Right.
So now grandma, grandpa, aunt, uncle now are part of that busy social group as well.
And we had to have support for my daughter because she needed to work. But in order to do that, my granddaughter had to go to daycare. So I would take her and I would pick her up. And if she were sick, I'd stay home with her. But you just don't know. But luckily, my husband and I were both working, so we were able to provide for her. We had enough room in our home to welcome them in, but not everybody's in that situation.
And I think it's important that, that people hear that there are other people out there, because there might be somebody watching today who may say, I didn't know these people were here, and I'm happy to hear that I'm not going along. So that's why we want to show phone numbers, which are important, and Facebook pages, which are very active, to get people and to get them out to your conference as well. What would you say to a grandparent watching now who may be afraid to take that step and say, oh, I'm just so overwhelmed?
Please call. Please call and get the support.
Or maybe some would say, and I hate to say it, it's a matter of pride also. They don't want to do that because they feel like I could handle it myself. But as you go through your life journey, you realize we're all in this together. So it's okay to call for help and say, hey, or at least for information.
Right. So, and it's that first step, because once you enter into that world, you find out that there's a whole lot of other people that have had the same problem, the same feelings, all the same emotions, etc., and the same hurdles that they have to keep going over. And when you have people sitting there who have gone through this, and it's not easy. I mean, there are people who are fighting for their grandchildren and to keep custody or to adopt them for years. And the odd dynamic is that grandparent who's fighting for the custody of that grandchildren is actually, the adversary is their own child. So it becomes a very interesting dynamic.
Right. The roller coaster of emotions. Because you both love your grandchild, but you're fighting your own blood, your own family to do what's
Right.
best for the grandchild.
Right.
Wow.
Right.
And as you said, you know, you already raised children, and now you're here again in a new chapter at a
Right.
different age, which
Right.
is always it's a challenge. And I think today we've learned that you're not alone. We do want to show, if our director Matt can just put up all the information again for our grandparents out there. The upcoming conference again is October 24th, and there's going to be a lot of resources there, information. These three advocates will be there. Seek them out and for information. So Arline, Frank, and Howard, we want to thank you. This half hour flew by. You're a wealth of information. God bless you all for what you do, and thank you. For everyone behind the scenes and Andy Mehalshick, I'm Jayne Ann Bugda. We want to thank you so much for making Newsmakers part of your day. Information on today's show on 2822news.com or under the Newsmaker tab. All the information there. And thank you for joining us, and we'll talk again next time.